Did it go 30 times? Did it go back,
you
back,
want,
back, back, back,
yeah,
back,
you want to hear?
30 times?
You want to hear?
Stop talking, crank it up, and show me. Because you know you ain't gonna do it.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Ah yes, the car scene is filled with people that commonly say, respect all builds, and then go on to talk about a 700 horsepower OEM muscle car. Doesn't make sense. We have those that won't respect all builds respectfully, and then you had those disrespectfully not respecting all builds while driving a base Neon with a body kit from 2003 because it was built, not bought, which somehow makes it okay. I'm not entirely sure of the rules of car clubs anymore, but that's a thing. The car industry, when it comes to understanding though what's acceptable and what's not, is about as emotionally subjective as Formula One officials determining who's at fault when two cars hit. Because I'm pretty sure at some point they're just putting the names into a hat, shaking it a little bit, and just picking one at random. And they're like, yeah, this week's Verstappen. A lot of these subjective opinions, trends, ideas, and subcultures in the automotive industry have come from none other than car clubs. I'm Alex @FI on Instagram, and today we're gonna be talking about the Jersey Shores of the car scene, the Kardashian drama of the industry, the Real Housewives of the car shows. We're gonna be talking about just what happened to car clubs. And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe. We're aiming for 1 million subs, and of course, it'd mean a lot if you do enjoy the channel to do that. And of course, we're looking for wheels, tires, suspension, fitmentindustries.com. If you notice, we have a shirt on for a full car giveaway that I put on 22 seconds ago. I had a deodorant stain right there, can you tell? Check these bad boys out. Those are socks with the sandals, which is pretty sick. So you can actually get automatically entered in to win a full-on car, like a full car. Not part of a car, a full car. It's like you put $1 in, you could get a car. You could put another $1 in, you could get another car. You know what I'm saying? But of course, if you're not looking for a free car, you could also just pick up wheels and tire packages in 7 days or less, going on our website, fitmentindustries.com. Car clubs are a prominent piece of automotive history. Ever since you could buy a car, there have been car clubs. Fairly similar to the days of like the Bosuzoku in Japan or the BMW clubs in Europe and the local classics of Columbus Valley and CAMs of the United States. Those were all car clubs that really paved the way for what we know and love today. Back then, car clubs across the world were made for no other reason than to bring a group of automotive enthusiasts together with maybe just a little tiny piece of potential illegal activity throughout their Saturday night cruises. Because anytime you bring a lot of people together, traditionally speaking, in the mid 20th century, there was illegal activity involved. But not a lot, okay? So maybe there were some alcohol runs that were happening. Maybe there's some gang-related stuff in the 40s. That's fine. They had cool cars though, so there was that. But car clubs really did establish one of the first informal ways that the enthusiast industry began collectively speaking to organizations like city councils, auto manufacturers, and the ones that we probably know the most, the Po-Po, the 5-0, the police. And this was good and bad for a lot of reasons. Most of their good came from the fact that anytime you get a mob together, some form of hierarchy helps control the chaos. Have you ever seen a 500 motorcycle cruise go on before? That type of group is an absolute tornado of like, we will do whatever we want. Simply because there's so many people together and no single figurehead that's controlling the chaos. And you get police upset, cities get upset, communities get upset, people get hurt, and the list goes on. And the only reason I actually bring up bikes was because I used to go on those rides, and so did Dakota, wherever he is. He's been a part of them too, I knew it, all right? And it was fun, but I officially do not condone what I used to do, okay? Car cruises, street racing, and rallies were pretty much the same thing. So car clubs began organizing the chaos, okay? They were establishing things they wanted from the city and things that they would adhere to as a group as long as the police kind of stayed off their ass about some basic stuff. And car clubs would continue to form around certain areas, certain ethnicities, certain neighborhoods, certain makes, models, and certain mantras or certain values. You could find car clubs back in the day that were part of your neighborhood, and it was a rite of passage to join those groups if you wanted to be seen as an adult. And it's not actually that far-fetched to say that some of that still happens in the 21st century. And I mean, back then, car clubs went pretty hard. It was very similar to a lot of other sort of team activities back then. And as the 60s, 70s, 80s came around, the media age of America further pushed the sexiness of car clubs. I mean, you had my boy John Travolta dancing up and down in Greece that made every mom at the time feel some sort of way as they were sliding up and down that 48 Studebaker, okay? You had Bullet, which is not actually a car club style movie, introduced the adrenaline-packed experience you could get with driving a muscle car and being a man, all right? It was just one of those things that just kind of paved the way for people to enjoy enjoy and really get attached to the automotive industry. And just like Fast and the Furious encouraged a lot of younger enthusiasts in the early 2000s to get into the car industry, movies like the Grand Prix, Smokey and the Bandit, Le Mans, and all of those types of movies did that for the previous generation, and they did it with their friends. What resulted was car clubs being founded throughout the states to get together and further enjoy their cars, drive like a badass, and get some bomb-ass bomber jackets that I really, really want. Every single time I was researching this, everybody's got cool bomber jackets, and then I put on a North Face. I don't even go on any North Face adventures. I drive to work and back. Look at how cool they look. And I have a North Face. Last time I was on a trail was when I was 16 years old, and I did it by accident. Car clubs then got digitized with the explosion of the World Wide Web. You had the next generation of enthusiasts transitioning from car club promotion through magazines and VHS pre-rolls like Option into http:// websites with their own terrible color schema and PO box to submit your application to so that you could send in your 4x6 photos. And for the most part, the controversy of car clubs was still relatively simple. People were still talking about other people's build styles, which style modification is truly modifying, and what club had the most established roots of who they were. And if you've ever been part of a true car club, like having fees and having a board, etc. This was like some serious ass business, and there are certain clubs that were making a ton of money doing this. But with the introduction of digital clubs, this is where things really began to shift. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and forums began to explode the definition of what a car club typically meant and began to open the door to the idea of car clubs into a massive million, bajillion, not a real number audience, and one that was typically a little bit younger, a little bit less experienced, but still as ornery as their grandparents that were in their throttle bomber jackets, which is still way cooler than any North Face ever made. I said it, I'll never take it back. So what happened? If you go look around, car clubs with the bomber jackets, local meets, and a true hierarchy structure that had a prominent focus in local communities have disappeared. They're nowhere to be seen. They're just not a thing anymore as much. There's a couple, but not really that many. So just what exactly happened to car clubs? This is the part where I would sing "You're the One That I Want," but there's 22 people in this room, and usually when I film this, there's one. So we're just gonna put John Travolta doing it right here. You're the one that I want. And if you didn't have a crush on Olivia Newton as a kid, I can't help you, and no one can. And if you haven't seen Grease, we can't be friends. There's a few reasons why you may not have the same quality of involvement with car clubs in the 21st century as you did in the 20th, okay? First off, because it's not as hard to get involved in the automotive scene now as it was back then. Car clubs were a catalyst for meets, events, city councils, and more. But a lot of that information required mail, it required physical meetups, it required a more in-person involvement. And because of us almost having all of the world's community available on the device that's the size of an old calculator that you really don't use to its fullest potential, you know it, I know it, we know what you're doing. You really don't need to have all of that in-person involvement anymore. You make a post, you tweet it, or whatever it's called. And additionally, the world has done quite a big shift in the mentality of volume versus involvement interests. I mean, think about it. Most people these days are involved in like 15 different clubs or groups. They attend some of their events, they don't really help out, and they just find what works best for them and their own self-interest. There's nothing really wrong with that, but more historic clubs were a bit more formal. They would require you to be involved with some sort of time commitment, some sort of money or due commitment that you had to pay every single year, event organization commitments, and more. And nowadays that stuff just typically doesn't happen, and instead it's being replaced with like just high volume, high turnover groups where there isn't that much of a requirement for entrance. I know this because before F5, that's really how I got involved in the automotive scene in Wisconsin. I started my very own Wisconsin Car Enthusiast Club, which has a huge volume-based group, but because of its lower requirements for entry, it's caused more of the gimme mentality and less of the how can I help mentality, which usually comes from the shift of a low volume versus a high volume car group. And it's just how it goes. It's just kind of the normal thing these days. And another big reason is because car clubs kind of regressed for a bit, and some more experienced group people just don't want to be associated with the new groups. Here's what I mean by that. I'm not trying to pick anybody in the old knockers, but this is kind of a thing. Back in the day, as you grew into a car club or group, you typically grew up into the ranks of titles, responsibilities, and also expectations. You had a higher expectation to either build a big boy car or be a representative for the club, host events, or just have some level of responsibility and accountability. You had to grow up. You had to be an adult. Responsibilities. Peter Parker that shit. And you did that over the course of years, if not decades. So when the internet comes around and slaps a huge community in front of you again that's practically rebuilt from the ground up because 40-year-olds aren't gonna make a Facebook group, you're left with a bunch of like 16 to 20-year-olds making groups and starting a new page every single 6 months. Hence, experienced people not really wanting to be involved unless they like the administration of the car groups that are being founded. And that's why a lot of clubs sometimes get that flack and why sometimes they just don't behave that maturely. It's just because they're so new. I mean, take a look at the one we just talked about. WCC was started online on Facebook by me when I was 19 years old, and I didn't know jack shit about running a car club, and I still barely do, and it's been 8 years later. So when I tried to gain members that were over the age of 30, they weren't really a fan of the idea. And now, almost a decade later, WCC exists as one of the oldest new car clubs in Wisconsin, and it's only 8 years old. There's car clubs out there that have existed for decades, and they're not anywhere to be seen anymore. And that gap is still very hard to close out because the generational difference between what old car clubs used to be and the new ones. And finally, car clubs just mean something different these days. With the experience coming down with the introduction of the internet groups and forums, in tandem with it being easier for automotive enthusiasts to join pretty much whatever they want, car clubs just don't have the same depth of involvement and therefore feel a bit more like an extracurricular activity than a family for some. I will say this, there are some excellent newer clubs out there, and there's some really good groups out there that are truly making a difference in the 21st century. The family that I get to be around every single time when we're hosting our very own shows has allowed me to grow as a human, and there's crews in Wisconsin that I know of, like Equal MKE, have always been around and have always treated people around them like family and are truly an embodiment of what I believe the next generation of car clubs should be. And I'm sure that there's plenty of groups or people that you know that are trying to do the same thing in your local state or local city. Just because you're new doesn't mean you can't be genuine. And while there may be a higher volume of car clubs out there these days, there's still some beautiful ones to be a part of that will help you push you forward as a car enthusiast, a person, and maybe become like a family that you never really ever had. But what do you think about car clubs? Are they absolutely dumb, stupid, or do you think they're coming back in some sort of way? Let us know in the comment section below. And of course, if you're looking for wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. Finally, we're very excited to do this full car giveaway. So if it means anything, please check out the links below. At least take a look at it. Let us know what you think about it. Follow along for the build by subscribing. And of course, if you want us to see us talk about something next, be sure to drop a comment below. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. We will see you later. Peace.